Joining us from Minneapolis, host of All In and author of the book The Sirens Call, Chris Hayes, staff writer for The Atlantic and MS Now political analyst Ashley Parker, and founder and president of the Democratic think tank Searchlight Institute, and former chief of staff Senator John Fetterman, Adam Gentleson. They're all here with us. Chris, you've been in Minneapolis. You've been doing a great job out there. Last night you said history was being made. Explain.
I mean, I just think I haven't quite seen anything in my lifetime in which you had a kind of nonviolent, organized, civil, nonviolent resistance movement find itself on the other end of state violence in the way that we've seen in the last 2 or 3 weeks here. I mean, the stat I keep telling people is that there have been 3 murders, shooting deaths in Minneapolis in this year. One of them between 2 people and 2 of them by DHS agents. We know the stories of Schwerner, Cheney, Goodman 60 years later after they were murdered in Mississippi in 1964. We know the story of the Edmund Pettus Bridge, like these moments where the state kills one of its own citizens. They resonate because they create such a profound and I think ubiquitous moral revulsion across all kinds of, I think, ideological, political, partisan lines. And, you saw that, in the 1960s, particularly around what happened in Mississippi, particularly what happened in Alabama. And I think you've seen it in response to what we've seen here in Minneapolis.
Do you think it's a tipping point?
Yeah, it was interesting. I was listening to your monologue, and I think you sort of framed it perfectly. Like, one of the lessons, right, of this decade is that there's never any actual crescendo, denouement. Like, things feel like they're in a constant state of unstable equilibrium, and you think to yourselves, it can't go on like this, and it goes on like this. And I will say that from talking to people here for the last 2 days, like, they have this kind of steely resolve. Like, they are not thinking about this in terms of news cycles. They're definitely not thinking about it in terms of like what words come out of whose mouth about what's happening. Like, they are focused on protecting their neighbors for as long as that is necessary and feel very like dug in for the long term if that's what it takes.
Yeah, I wonder, I mean, you're in Minnesota, which is, the last Democratic state, solidly Democratic state so far in the Midwest. The others swung to Donald Trump in this last election. And it's been seen as, something of the resistance up there in the former Blue Wall. Can you get a full sense of how the rest of the country feels about immigration? I know we've all seen the images of Alex Preddy and of Renee Good and of, Liam Ramos and all of the other stuff and the build on it. And there is this collective horror at it. But a lot of the country, as I mentioned, it really does feel strongly that we need stronger immigration enforcement, stronger borders. And they did feel let down by Democrats during the Biden years on that. And that's one of the reasons why people voted for Donald Trump when they might have voted for Biden in the past. So can you get a sense of whether this is a moment that Democrats, and I know it's kind of crass to mix politics, 2026, 2028 politics with, what's happening right now and the horror of it, but that's the way things change. So can you get a sense of whether the party is going to be able to show the horror of this moment and reject it, but also say to voters, hey, listen, we understand that you don't like, unchecked immigration. We can fix that for you as well.
Yeah, I think there's been a few problems that have brought us to this moment. One, I think there was this sense that took over Democratic politics and messaging, particularly during the Biden years, that the issue was bad for us, so don't talk about it. Change the topic. And it didn't work. So you had the worst of both worlds. You had in 23, I think, 24, you had record-setting levels of in-migration in the country. That's just an empirical fact. I think it was 2.6 million people in one of those years that set the record. With this kind of like, we're just not going to talk about it from the Democrats, that left this awful vacuum. I think one way conceptually Democrats can think about this, and I think you're right, that people have conflicted impulses. I like to compare it to abortion before Roe was repealed. Depending on how you ask the question, depending on what they were facing, depending on which part of their moral instincts were being cultivated, people would find themselves in different places about abortion. what you've got with immigration is something similar now, and sometimes there's these external forcing mechanisms that force people off the fence. I think that's what's happening with Alex Preddy's death and with Renee Good's death. The second thing I'll say is there is a conceptual distinction between what is happening at the border or how many people are being let into the country in any given moment or coming into the country, and how you feel about your neighbors who are here. And I think it was that crucial distinction that has led us to this point, because what they did at the border was popular. I mean, they basically, along with Mexico's cooperation, have essentially shut border entry down. That was popular. Going around and rounding up 5-year-olds and pepper spraying observers and abducting people in the middle of the street on their way to their job is repugnant to people. And there actually is a conceptual distinction that I think can be embedded in a more holistic framework from Democrats as they think about what the policy actually looks like.
So, Adam, what is that a more holistic framework? How do they seize it?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think the holistic framework is both saying that Democrats take enforcement seriously, but we want that enforcement to be fair and humane and consistent with good principles of law and order. I mean, Katie, to get back to your question of whether this is a turning point, I think that it really is up to Democrats. It could be a turning point if Democrats handle this moment the right way. And one of the mistakes that we made in the past was we took genuine tipping point moments like these and we used them to say, how far to the left can we go? And we stake out the farthest stuff we possibly can, almost like on a dare. And when we do that, what happens inevitably is that the voters who are torn, the voters who are being repelled by what they're seeing right now, this is causing them to lose their faith in Republicans. This is causing them to be open to Democrats. If we move as far left as we possibly can, those voters will eventually swing back to Republicans. So Democrats need to say, look, what Americans want is a party that does two things, that takes enforcement seriously and that is also fair and humane in the way that it treats people. And right now, there is not a party that is seizing that opportunity. That is what Democrats can do here. And if they do that, this can be a tipping point, and they can build a permanent and durable power out of this that will, send Trump packing and try to push back against this rise of right-wing authoritarianism that we're seeing here, this manifest in these thugs going into people's homes and breaking up families and killing people in the street and abducting 5-year-old kids.
There are two things that are happening right now that I'd love to get your opinion on. One of them is potentially a partial government shutdown by Democrats in the Senate, refusing to sign on to the DHS bill. First, I'll start with that. Is that a good idea?
Yeah, I think Democrats absolutely should play hardball here. I mean, they cannot vote for funding. Certainly they can't vote for more funding for ICE under these circumstances, but they certainly can't vote for any funding unless they get reforms that will put an end to some of these worst abuses. They should demand that Kristi Noem is gone. They should demand that Stephen Miller is gone. And they should demand that we put reforms in place that will stop these abuses that we're seeing. Democrats don't have a ton of leverage right now. They are in the minority, but they have enough leverage to block the vote in the Senate and demand these reforms. And I think that's an incredibly reasonable position. And it's also the morally right thing to do. What
about the calls to abolish ICE?
No, that's what I was talking about before. If you go that far, almost like you're being dared, like, can we back the farthest left slogan we can imagine? You might be able to sort of stay above water for a little while on that, but eventually people are going to swing back against that. People want strong enforcement. They would be happy to see ICE, dramatically reformed root and branch. They're not wedded to this agency as it is. They certainly want to see big changes. But when you say abolish ICE, it sounds like you want to get rid of enforcement altogether. That's not what most people mean when they say it, but you shouldn't use a slogan where you immediately then have to explain to people who hear it that you don't really mean what it sounds like you mean. So, just say what you mean is sort of our advice to Democrats here. If you think there should be reforms, if you think ICE should conduct itself differently, if you think it should be reformed root and branch, say all that. That's where we're gonna win this fight.
So, Ashley, on the subject of, can the Democrats seize the moment? I wonder, do Republicans really feel? I mean, some Republicans feel like they're losing it. Obviously, you heard Thom Tillis speaking very candidly to a reporter, but it doesn't seem like Donald Trump thinks he's losing it. He hasn't pushed Stephen Miller farther away from him. Kristi Noem still has a job. Corey Lewandowski is still sniffing around. He kicked out Bovino and brought in Homan. But that is not entirely signaling an administration that thinks that they do need to change much in terms of his immigration policy, even though he is drastically underwater now on it.
Right. I mean, I think it's funny when or not funny, that's the wrong word. I apologize. But when he kicked out Bovino and brought in Homan, there was this sense of, oh, is he softening? And yes, Homan is not Bovino, but Homan is sort of institutional competent MAGA, right? The idea that it's not like he's kicking out Bovino and bringing in an immigrant rights activist or even someone neutral on the policy. But I will say, I think the president is aware that he has a problem. I mean, we are seeing sort of backbiting and leaking in the press, which we associate with the first term. And not really this term between Corey and Homan and Secretary Noem. That is a sign that they are aware that everyone is on thin ice and that the president is upset. That's the first thing. And there's something also that the president viscerally understands about the power of video and the power of images. And one of the things that has been so devastating about what is happening on the ground in Minneapolis, other than the actual facts on the ground in Minneapolis, is you have a situation where people with their own eyes can see that what happened is not what the president and what his people are saying. And there's a few moments in Trump's career, including going all the way back to the Access Hollywood video, where he understands that real video of showing something that people don't like, that they find morally reprehensible or deeply upsetting, it moves people. And again, I don't know if he is going to fire people, but he is certainly aware, and his team is certainly aware, that this is a political problem for him.